Dobro. History. Archive.
Okay, picture this. It's 1911. Two teams are setting out to conquer the very last great prize on planet Earth, the South Pole. One of them, led by the Norwegian Roald Amundsen, pulled off a stunning, perfect victory. The other, led by Britain's Captain Robert Falcon Scott, walked into legend and into absolute tragedy. You see, this was way more than just a race. It was a clash of philosophies, of technologies, a brutal, brutal test of preparation that revealed the fatal difference between a plan that can bend and one that just breaks. So let's dig in and do a forensic analysis of how this race was won and how it was so catastrophically lost. Right here, this is the moment the dream just died. I mean, can you imagine? You trek for months and months across a frozen hellscape, pushing your body to its absolute limit, only to get there and find out you've been beaten. These are the words Scott wrote in his diary when he reached the pole and saw Amundsen's flag already flying there. The psychological blow was just devastating, and it really frames the central question we're going to tackle. How did it all go so terribly, terribly wrong for Scott's team? So to really get this, we have to go back to what's known as the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. The map of the world was pretty much filled in, but the South Pole, that was the final unconquered spot. It wasn't just a point on a map. No, it was a massive symbol of national prestige. This was a chance for the great industrial powers to prove their might on the world stage. And right from the get-go, you've got two completely different missions. For Captain Scott, this was a duty to the British Empire. He had this dual mandate: claim the pole, for sure, but also conduct this huge scientific survey. That split focus meant he had to make compromises. But for Amundsen, who was representing a brand new independent Norway, the goal was brutally simple, laser-focused. Get to the pole first, full stop. Science could wait. Speed and survival were everything. And this, right here, is the core of it all. The outcome of this race wasn't really decided out there on the ice. Nope, it was decided on paper, in the planning. It was the direct result of two vastly different logistical philosophies, where every single choice, from where you set up camp to the clothes you wore, had life or death consequences. Let's start with just location. Amundsen made this super bold and kind of risky choice for his base camp, the Bay of Whales. Now, other explorers thought this spot was unstable ice, too dangerous, but Amundsen did his homework on the glaciology and figured out it was safe. That one decision put his starting line a full 60 miles closer to the pole than Scott's base. That's a 120-mile round-trip advantage before anyone even took a single step. And the transport strategies, wow, this just shows the completely different mindsets. Amundsen built his entire plan around one single proven technology: Greenland Huskies. The dogs were his engines, and this is key, they were also his emergency fuel. Weaker dogs were fed to the stronger ones and to the men. It's harsh, but it's an incredibly efficient way to recycle energy. Scott, on the other hand, had this fragile, complicated mixed system. His fancy new motor sledges broke down almost immediately. The ponies he chose weren't suited for the conditions. They'd sweat, the sweat would freeze, and they'd sink in the snow. His final resort? Man-hauling. Literally, men in harnesses dragging their own heavy sledges like beasts of burden. You know, surviving in Antarctica is all about managing moisture. Amundsen, he got this. He adopted the Inuit way of dressing, loose layers of reindeer skin that lets sweat and moisture escape. But Scott's team, they wore traditional British naval gear, tight layers of wool and gabardine. When you're man-hauling, you're sweating buckets. All that sweat got trapped in their clothes. And when they stopped for the day, it froze solid. They called their clothes suits of armor that literally sucked the heat right out of their bodies every single night. And then there was the silent killer, scurvy. See, at the time, nobody really knew what caused it. The leading theory was that it came from tainted meat. So Scott's team, being very careful, cooked everything thoroughly to kill any bacteria. And in a tragic twist of fate, that very process destroyed what little vitamin C was in their food. Amundsen, on the other hand, was following Inuit practice. He and his men ate fresh, undercooked seal and dog meat. They didn't even know the science behind it, but they were dosing themselves with vitamin C every day, keeping themselves healthy. And that brings us to maybe the most critical flaw of all, the nutrition. If you just look at the calories, it seems like a fair fight, right? Both teams are eating about 4,500 calories a day. But here's the kicker. That's not the whole story. Amundsen's team, skiing and riding on sledges, were burning roughly what they were eating. But Scott's team, man-hauling those heavy sledges, especially at high altitude, were burning up to 6,500 calories a day. The math? Well, the math was a death sentence. The result was a daily calorie deficit of around 2,000 calories for Scott's men, every single day. They were quite literally starving to death while eating their full rations. Their bodies were cannibalizing themselves just to keep going. First fat, then muscle. The plan had a slow, physical breakdown baked right into it. Okay, so we've got the plans, we see the flaws. Now let's see how this all played out as the two teams actually started their push south across the ice. This timeline just lays it all out in stark terms. Amundsen leaves earlier, he moves faster. By the time he's at the pole on December 14th, Scott is still more than a month away. Scott finally arrives to find the Norwegian flag waiting for him, a full 34 days late. But look at this date right here, January 4th. This is where Scott makes a call that takes a really bad situation and makes it, well, catastrophic. When he was getting close to the pole, Scott made an impulsive, last-minute decision. The plan, for months, for years, had always been for a four-man team to make that final push. But almost on a whim, he added a fifth man, Bertie Bowers, to the group. This single choice, made in a moment, created a catastrophic ripple effect through their already strained logistics. I mean, just think about what that one extra person means. The tent was designed for 4 men. Now you've got 5 crammed in there, so nobody's resting well. The food had been meticulously packed in 4-man units. Now they had to awkwardly split it up 5 ways every meal, wasting fuel and time. And worst of all, Bowers had left his skis at a previous depot, assuming he was turning back. So while the other 4 were on skis, he had to trudge through deep snow on foot, slowing the entire team down every single step. So after finding they'd lost the race, the British team turned for home. They were demoralized, they were physically depleted. Amundsen's return journey was basically a victory lap. Scott's would become a slow, agonizing descent into oblivion. The breakdown was sequential, and it was brutal. First to go was Edgar Evans. He was the biggest, strongest man in the party, which meant he suffered the most from the caloric deficit. He collapsed at the base of a huge glacier. Next was Lawrence Oates. His feet were ravaged by frostbite and gangrene, and he made his famous ultimate sacrifice. And that left the last 3, Scott, Wilson, and Bowers, to push on, their bodies failing them with every agonizing step. These are some of the most famous last words in history. Oates knew he couldn't keep up, that he was slowing his friends down and endangering their lives. So on his 32nd birthday, he just calmly said this, stood up, walked out of the tent, and into a raging blizzard. He was never seen again. It's just a moment of incredible courage in the face of complete and utter hopelessness. And as if things weren't bad enough, the continent itself decided to deliver the final knockout punch. They got hit with a climatic anomaly, something no one could have predicted. Temperatures in March plummeted 20 degrees Fahrenheit below the seasonal average. Now, at -40, the physics of snow actually changes. The ice crystals become like sandpaper. It doubles the friction on the sledge runners. For starving men, it was like trying to pull their sledge through deep sand. It was an impossible task. The nighttime temperatures dropped to an almost unimaginable -47 degrees Fahrenheit. For men who were already starving, whose bodies had no fuel left to burn, these were simply unsurvivable conditions. The environment itself had turned on them. And this is maybe the cruelest detail of the whole story. A massive blizzard pinned them down in their tent. And they were just 11 miles away from a huge supply depot full of food and fuel that would have saved their lives. The storm raged for 10 days straight. They never made it out of the tent. So, when all is said and done, what's the final verdict on this epic tragedy? Well, it's a complicated lesson, isn't it? It's about planning, it's about preparation, and about the razor-thin margin between success and failure in the harshest place on Earth. Ultimately, it all boils down to this: margin for error. Amundsen had engineered a robust system. He built in surpluses. He had extra food, extra dogs. He had a plan that could absorb mistakes and bad luck. Scott, on the other hand, designed a fragile system. It was this complex chain of motors and ponies and men that required every single link to work perfectly. And when things started to go wrong, and in Antarctica things always go wrong, his system had no margin for error. It just shattered. And that brings us to the big question that historians still argue about today. Was the death of Scott and his men just a case of terrible, terrible luck, like that freak cold snap? Or did a series of flawed decisions, the transport, the diet, that fifth man, create a situation where any amount of bad luck was guaranteed to be fatal? It's a question that echoes from that frozen continent, a stark reminder of the cost of miscalculation at the very end of the world.